Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Preparing for the Holiday Rush, Top CRO Strategies for Retailers. We've got quite a packed session today, so we're hoping to complete all the content with plenty of time for Q&A within about 35 minutes. So it should be plenty of time for you to have a few spare minutes before the top of the hour. Just going to move over to the next slide, please, Douglas. So today's session will be recorded. If you want to see a copy of the slides afterwards, I'll be sending an email around afterwards with a copy of the recording. So if you want to see the slides, feel free to just reply and let me know, and I'll ping those over. And today we're going to cover a couple of major things, obviously ending in hopefully lots of questions. We're going to be looking at how to plan a CRO program for the Christmas period, but also what's going to be applied to other peak seasonality periods, depending on the type of retailer that you are, Valentine's Day, Easter, for example. We're going to be looking at finding opportunities to improve key sections of your marketing and sales funnel, improving the experience of gift givers, and pitfalls to watch out for with seasonality linked with conversion rate optimization. So my name is Mario Kiriakou. I am one of the co-founders here at Ratio, and I'm pleased to be joined by two of my much smarter colleagues, Doug Morris, our Insights Director, and Michael Pearson, one of our lead optimization consultants, to run us through what will hopefully be a really interesting presentation for everyone on the call today. The briefest of introductions about who Ratio are. We are a optimization consultancy. We work with many organizations from across lots of different sectors with analytics, conversion rate optimization, MarTech enablement, all focused on how can you optimize and improve customer conversions to drive more sales from your digital channels online. And that's enough of us. Just one little thing. Just go back 1 second, Doug. We're really keen if you could follow us. We do lots of these webinars. We put out lots of blogs and articles. We try and be as helpful as possible to the community. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. Mark us as a trusted email in your inbox, and hopefully we'll see you on another session. Before we get into the session, we're going to launch a quick poll. So I'll let that run for a few seconds just to collect as many results as possible. But the question is, does your organization have a CRO seasonality strategy? We're really keen on this. We're really keen on understanding when organizations start planning, how early in the year. We know that retailers typically will start, as soon as Christmas is over from a business perspective. But from CRO perspective, we really keen to know, how late in the season organizations and marketers perhaps leave this.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario. Yes, so today's presentation is going to be a mix of the strategic and the more practical. And we're going to start at the more strategic or planning area, I guess, which is maybe evaluating some of the elements you should be thinking about at this point in the year, for argument's sake, if your peak period is expected to be Black Friday or Christmas, in order to make sure that you have the best possible CRO program to execute during that time period. And one of the first and most critical elements of planning your CRO program for the peak period is to conduct research and information gathering. And so some of the things that we think it's effective to look at from this perspective are, firstly, looking at what has happened historically within your own website. When did traffic spike? By how much? Which user journeys were key to conversions or which had the highest dropout points? When we understand these metrics, we can use them to guide us where we focus optimizations this year. And we'd encourage you not to stop there, but to dig beneath the top line, looking, for example, at what products were top sellers or which pages were part of high-value conversions. Collecting all this information from an analytics perspective can help us to shape the strategy moving forward. Similarly, we can look at competitors and what they did historically. Obviously, we're not looking to copy what they did, but understanding what seemed to work for them rather, based on what they had in market closer to the peak date can help us understand where their relative advantages are and where there's potentially opportunity for us to differentiate. We would want to also collect information about our audience, and there's different ways we could approach that. One could be surveying high-value customers and understanding from them what they liked or disliked most about last year's shopping experience. But one very fruitful area in general, but specifically at this time of year, to mine for information is looking at customer service logs. If your customer service representatives are tagging their calls with the by theme, understanding the trends there can help you understand what information to present within the website. And you might also learn some things from looking at other non-website channels and tests that were executed last year. For example, subject line testing or content or offers that were tested within email campaigns. All of this information can give you a much clearer sense of how to shape your CRO strategy and make the most targeted improvements. So another thing that is sometimes overlooked is around collaboration with teams outside of marketing that can lead to the best possible outcomes over this time period. And one team that may become a blocker to your efforts if you don't actively collaborate with them could be the IT team. In particular, because you're likely to have some sort of code freeze that they take very seriously at this time of year, and for good reason, because it's to de-risk things. So negotiating with your IT team about when that code freeze will start, what changes can and can't be made outside of the code freeze, making it clear to them what the potential upside is of some of the changes you'd like to make, not just the downsides, can ensure that you're able to achieve as much as possible while still managing that risk. Another really critical aspect of this time of year that means that it's worthwhile engaging with your IT team is around quality assurance and regression testing. We probably all acknowledge it's not something that we are experts at as marketers. We're not quality assurance people. And so by potentially getting the IT team to invest some resources in conducting more thorough testing and quality assurance of the experiments you plan to put live, that's another way that you can de-risk things. And also potentially to look at setting experiments live to a smaller percentage of the audience in the first instance to ensure that you can monitor the results and ensure there's nothing unforeseen happening before you go, let's say, to a full 50-50 split for a given experiment. It's also really, really important to collaborate with operations and logistics people at this time of year and having a plan in place to do that. And I just have one anecdote. I used to work for a retailer in Australia that made a lot of its money each year from seasonal gifting periods. And we had one experience where there wasn't this necessary collaboration, which was around Valentine's Day, with this retailer that I worked at who traditionally had sold electronic gift vouchers for experiences like skydiving and had no experience really with the dispatch of physical items. They decided to venture into roses one Valentine's Day. And sure enough, we sold a lot of roses, but we didn't have the logistics of delivering the roses nailed down. On the morning of Valentine's Day, the company we contracted to deliver these in refrigerated vans canceled the contract. And we had this manic, frantic experience where call center staff, marketers, and developers were catching taxis to car and truck rental places to try and deliver at least some of the roses ourselves and fulfill on that promise. And so it is really important from that perspective to ensure that you can fulfill on what you're committing to. And another element around that is ensuring you have certainty around what you can promise from a delivery point of view, because there's no better way to let down a customer you just converted than to not be able to deliver by the date that you promised to. You might also want to consider budgeting and forecasting at this point. So what you can do, for example, is to look at the traffic and conversion levels on your website in previous years and make some sort of forecast about, as well, I should say, looking at the journeys that you might want to optimize to determine how many tests, do the math on how many tests you think you can run over what time periods. And in doing that, you can make a estimate of what you're from an experimentation velocity point of view, you think you can achieve. and then use that estimate to determine whether you have the resources in order to actually make use of all of the opportunities you've identified. And if you don't, then obviously you can look at overflow resources from contractors or agencies who can help to flesh out the resources of your team during the peak period specifically. And another thing it's good to think about is having a contingency budget. So probably not be any surprise to us that lots of the time you have a fantastic plan, but things can still go wrong. And what we want to do is have some money and resources in place in order to act on things in that scenario. Just finally, sometimes it's worth thinking about what the structure of the CRO program should be at this time of year. So what we suggest, at least for this few months before a major gifting occasion, is to look away from a model like Kanban or first in, first out, and instead look at a sprint-based model where you work in, let's say, 2-week sprints in order to deliver stuff. And then importantly, you reprioritize at the end of each sprint. And based on the new information you have about what's happening in this gifting season, see whether perhaps tests in other areas of the funnel should be where resources are going, if those are the resources that are problematic. And another thing that's really important here is to make sure you have a continuous feedback loop with teams outside of marketing, because they might be getting learnings that they can share with you, i.e. that example about email subject line testing, maybe, or like ad copy testing from a paid search perspective. Those are things that you can incorporate into the tests that you yourself are executing. So the takeaways from our point of view, from a planning perspective, are make sure that you've done your research, look at last year's traffic, look at competitive strategies to find opportunities, focus on the key products that you expect to sell. Do the budgeting and forecasting to understand whether you need extra help to maximize what you can achieve during these peak periods. Ensure that you're collaborating with other teams and not just acting in a silo, because that will allow you to achieve more in the case of IT and do it in a de-risked way. And think about whether your project management approach should be adapted at this time of year to take into account what will allow you to work most effectively in a peak season. And now I'll hand to my colleague, Michael, who will talk in a bit more detail about some of the tactics that we can use.
Great. Thank you, Doug. So yeah, this will be kind of now discussing how you can create your optimization program and how to identify opportunities and potential tests that you can run on your own website. So one of the first things you want to do when thinking about areas to test in is you want to review the user experience of your website. And to do this, you should start by going through popular journeys and pages and determine both through your own observation and web analytics data if the pages are achieving their goals. So in the visual here, I've got some examples of typical e-commerce pages that you might see, and below the goals that each of those pages might have. So as an example, from the homepage, you could be wanting users to visit a product category page or a product listing page, and then product pages should generate add to cart clicks or other product views. And then from your cart pages, you obviously want users to complete purchases from there. So that's kind of how you might look at it from an analytics perspective, but then really important as well is looking at it from kind of a heuristics or a qualitative perspective. So one method of doing that, which is one I use all the time, and I think one of the most effective methods, is the LIFT methodology. And what that is basically a way of assessing the content of your pages by thinking about 6 key factors that contribute to conversion. So the first and most important factor of these 6 is the value proposition, which is what a user has to gain from your product or service, how it's better than your competitors, and why it's worth the cost to them. Then the next section is kind of 2 polar opposites to think about, which is relevance or distraction. So these are kind of yin and yang factors, which is relating to the information on the page. Does it provide context that's relevant to the product or service, or is it distracting information? which is anything that doesn't really need to be on this page specifically. So as an example here, if you're viewing a product page for a table, as an example, relevant information might be things like product specifications, information on material sourcing, return policy or warranty. But things that might be distracting would be generic information that's not specific to the product you're looking at. So if it's talking about the return policy or sourcing materials for other products that don't fit the product page you're on, then that could be considered distracting information that might draw users away from conversion. Then the next 2 points are around clarity versus anxiety. So this is a measure of how clear your information is and whether or not the average customer would have any questions about the details featured on a page. So this is, I think, particularly relevant for holiday periods and any kind of discounting or special offers you might have. An example would be if you've got a special offer on certain kind of products, but the details of the products included or the dates that the offer will last are unclear, then this could create anxiety for users, and then that can be a drawback from conversion. Then finally, the last point is around urgency. So does the page convince users that they should complete the desired action now, today, instead of coming back later? Not all pages can generate urgency due to their nature. However, during holiday periods, this can be a really big factor. And so then now looking at the pages that I've got in this slide here, I think these are just kind of good examples for contextualizing what each of these are. So in the red box, you've got the value proposition. So starting with the left image, this is an example from a really good website, Commonwealth Bank. And I've just kind of broken down how they've set out a really clear structure on each of their bank accounts. So in this case, we've got the value proposition, which is the featured rates and the features and benefits of this savings account that they have, followed by the relevant information, which is details on the interest rates, any fees that are related to the account, and then finally they've got clarity, which is on who's eligible to apply, and any details on the steps you must take to do so. Then for the right-hand side is more of an e-commerce page, which is Target. And again, you can see the red boxes is the images and videos related to this pair of jeans. Then you have product description. And then within the blue box, they've actually got a little message which basically says only 3 of this product left, which helps generate that sense of urgency as to why they should purchase now. And then below all that, you have the yellow box, which is relevant information on sizing, other details from the product description, and then clarifying information they've got down the bottom, shipping and returns information, as well as some Q&A questions there as well. So now we'll move on to some kind of test examples that either we've run or we've pulled from kind of blogs and the online sphere, as things that you could potentially take and test on your own website, or ideas that could prompt potential changes that you might be interested in exploring. So this first one here is a test that we run around free delivery information and the impact that that can have. So in this case, what we did is replaced what we kind of saw to be a distracting CTA just below the add to basket, which is that back to Kingsley School uniforms, because this is taking you back up the funnel as opposed to leading to conversion. And we replaced it with information around the free delivery offer that they had, which is once you spend a certain amount of money, you'll get free delivery. And for them, this generated quite a substantial increase in order confirmations. So they saw a 4.8% increase in order confirmations from this test. And this idea or concept can be explored in all sorts of ways. You can have a homepage, site-wide banner that says free delivery for, this holiday season, or it can be displayed on product pages as we've seen here. But generally, that sort of information around delivery can be a really strong value proposition for users. Up next is a test around showcasing relevant products. So this one's a little bit more specific to I guess, certain industries as opposed to others. In this case, someone ran a test where they were looking at probably like a furniture shop or something, and if a user was to purchase a couch or add a couch to their basket, they would offer to add in an optional kind of leather conditioning kit. And so this is kind of a good example of showcasing relevant related products to users once they've already shown interest in a particular thing, in this case, the leather couch. And the results of this one was a 6.6% increase in revenue for this particular retailer, which is quite strong. And then the next test is basically the same concept, but an alternative way of doing that. And this one's probably a little bit more popular, which is featuring like a you may also like sort of section. And again, this one can be a really good strategy to either boost sales or average order value. And often this is best implemented if you really leverage your analytics data and see users that purchase item A, what are they most likely to also purchase? And if you implement that, yeah, you've got a good test that works in quite a lot of retailers. And in this case, saw a 13% uplift in sales. This next one is around urgency. So this one, we've got a retailer that's featured this next day delivery messaging in the bottom right for option B here. So this kind of shows you how featuring timers on your offers or free delivery options can be really useful in causing a boost in sales as well. And even though this is a test for next day delivery, I've tested this one in the past for your site-wide sales during Christmas or Black Friday or Cyber Monday. And typically, this is a really good strategy. If you give users a countdown timer at the top of the site saying, Black Friday sales end in X amount of time, that can often be a really successful strategy for boosting urgency for users. Then this last one is around the value proposition. So this one's an example of a change that Airbnb made, which is featuring social proof to their hotel stays page at the top of the page. This is a test that you can run in all sorts of areas of your site. And when done effectively, it's super successful. So in this case, obviously, it's on the apartment listing page, and they've got this really strong point around 460,000 guest reviews with an average of 4.8 out of 5 stars, which is very reassuring, and to the average user just gives them a lot more confidence that they are getting a really good deal by booking with Airbnb. So I'll now hand over back to Doug, and he can take you through creating a great experience for gift givers. Whoops.
Thanks very much, Michael. I can.
No worries.
I'm random. All right. Yeah. So the reality is, many of these, at least from an e-commerce perspective, many of these peak seasonal events are relating to gifting. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, potentially even some portion of your Black Friday audience are looking for deals to give at Christmas. And so one thing we want to take into account is not just generically how we can improve the experience for everyone by leveraging some of those factors that Michael referenced from the LIFT framework, but also looking specifically at the experience for gift givers and gift recipients, I should say. And so here are some of the things we've seen success with in the past. So one thing is around seasonal navigation, and that could be either having a navigation option specific to the occasion, and or also introducing gift ideas navigation section. And the reason that this is great is because it takes the guesswork out of shopping. So visitors don't have to kind of browse around with uncertainty about whether they're going to the right place to find a gift for their parents. Instead, you can provide them with a quick and easy route to a curated list of products. So this test would be about speed and convenience. And that's crucial when people are in a hurry around Christmas time with so many people to buy for. in most cases. Similarly, we can look at how we can optimize the search experience itself. And so we're trying to achieve a similar thing here, but for users that have a different preference as far as how they interact with the website. So within your site search, you could look potentially at changing the suggestive search and ensuring that when people are searching for gift-related terms, that you're giving them some examples they can search for. Now, obviously, we touched on the fact that at this time of year, you may have code freezes that prevent you from actually making changes to your site search functionality. But other things I've seen or like done myself actually are to just put some static information below or in proximity to the site search with some of the key search terms you think people might want to search for. And even that, although it's like faking it a little bit around suggestive search, does lead to great outcomes. One final one relating to search that you might want to consider, if possible, is how you can optimize the presentation of the search results themselves. So obviously, like the underlying technology behind site search is different from site to site. It may not be, you may not have too many options to tweak the algorithm with your website, but if you do, and especially if one of the things that the recommendations is looking at is what had the most sales recently, it can be worthwhile looking at feeding into it not just recent sales data, but historical sales data. So let's say now we're at the 1st of November and you have a site that has some goods that people can purchase that are or aren't gift related or gift relevant. Obviously, the sales data for all of the non-gift relevant products is less important from a merchandising point of view. Whereas if you can go back to November of last year and identify the products that had the highest conversion rate or the highest revenue or profit per page view or whatever metrics you're using to determine the ranking order, then that can ensure that you're giving things a boost immediately. Another strategy potentially is to, from a merchandising perspective, to have curated holiday gift landing pages, I guess like the ones I showed from the navigation, and or looking at what labels you can provide to help users a bit, like popular as a gift or something like that, putting that on the product card within the product listing page. Setting delivery expectations is obviously really critical at this time of year, and we have a few examples of how that's being done well and, in our view, not so well. So this great one from Fortnum & Mason detects the fact that I'm not actually located in the UK geographically, which is true, I'm in Hungary, and alerts me immediately that I'm not going to be able to ship to Hungary if that's my intention. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone to websites and there's been no such functionality, and I've got all the way through to the checkout before realizing that actually they don't ship to my location. And so getting in early is really helpful from a customer experience point of view here. And what Fortnum & Mason are doing, although it's a bit blocked out by the title, is harvesting email addresses, or harvesting's maybe a bit harsh, but yeah, collecting email addresses from people who would like shipping to Hungary, so that they can understand what the demand is like, and also alert those people at a later date. An execution that I don't think is particularly strong is what Hotel Chocolat have on their website right now, where all they have is a delivery options link within a ribbon below the navigation. Yes, it's kind of prominent, but it's also not really particularly informative. The user needs to click through to the delivery options page, and it's not so obvious, I might add, that this is even a link, so it all looks like one big image, in order to determine how long things will take to arrive and what the cost might be. And obviously that additional friction, taking people away potentially from the purchase journey they're within, is not the way to provide people the easiest route to the information. Another thing you might consider if you have a website where there is some kind of like direct to recipient model is alleviating people's anxiety, to Michael's point from the LIFT framework, about what that experience will be like for the gift recipient. And so we have, for example, Tiffany & Co. here, who within their product detail pages explain that every one of these products that they ship will come in the Tiffany blue box. But in my view, they could actually go a little bit further there, because that explains what the product itself is within, were you to ship it from the... But doesn't explain, for example, whether the gift will come in plain packaging, whether there'll be an invoice or like shipping label within so that the recipient would be able to see the price. And these are all questions you'd have if you're contemplating sending a product from a website directly to a recipient. And by answering those questions up front, you can alleviate that potential anxiety and make people more likely to convert. Another really powerful test that you can do at this time of year and maybe has more impact than it takes in terms of effort to get sign off is to reformulate existing guarantees or proof points into one broader umbrella as far as a guarantee. So when I worked at this retailer, Red Balloon, that sells the online gift vouchers, we created what was formulated at the time as a happiness guarantee and saw something like a 14% uplift in conversions from the product info page to the basket. And this was all just taking things that we thought would be compelling to a user and wrapping them up in an umbrella that made them feel more powerful or persuasive than they actually are individually. And again, keeping in mind that people have this potentially anxiety about whether the recipient's going to like the gift, highlighting things like transparency around return policies, emphasizing positive customer feedback, including, I should say, assurances around customer satisfaction, that can really add peace of mind and make people more likely to hit the add to cart button. And finally, one other tactic I would say that we found quite successful at Red Balloon, and you might want to look at yourself if you're not already, is really leaning into the option of buying online or e-gift vouchers in the final days of your marketing campaign, if it's gifting related, if it's the case that there's no longer time to fulfill an order physically. And we, even on Christmas morning, we used to make hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who had not bought a gift for their family member or significant other, and we were able to help them look like the wonderful partners or family members they were by providing them with a thoughtful gift they could get from us. Just want to talk briefly about some of the pitfalls around CRO at this time of year and things you might want to take into account when you're prioritizing which of these tactics or strategies that you pursue. So the first one is about prioritization. And again, just like the project management approach to your CRO program, giving consideration to the fact that maybe prioritization needs to mean different things at this time of year. And one example I would have, drawing on like a very common prioritization framework, which is like effort, complexity, impact, would be to lean more into and weight more heavily the effort and complexity variables rather than the impact variable. And there's a few reasons that you might want to change how you prioritize things at this time of year. One is that there's an opportunity cost at this time of year. The longer it takes you to launch an experiment, then that's money that you're leaving on the table, provided it's going to be a winning one. And so prioritizing speed to market over delivering the perfect impact means that net you might and probably will actually get better outcomes commercially. And another is that potentially at this time of year, if you've got that feedback loop in place and you're monitoring the data as the campaign goes on, is that you're going to learn things as the campaign goes on that might mean that you should reprioritize or refocus your efforts in other places. So let's say you're launching a very complex cart test and you find it's actually the checkout that needs the most attention, but you're in the midst of a 3-week project to update the cart, then you potentially lose the opportunity to ensure your efforts are focused as productively as possible. We should also not, at this time of year, assume that whatever learnings we generate are going to live forever. Just because you've gathered a lot of data, you've had a lot of traffic and conversions, it doesn't mean that these insights will work all year round. The reality is that people, again, particularly during gifting occasions, have a different mindset. They have different priorities. And so both from what you let live on your website after the gifting period, but also what assumptions you make about the longer term impact of some of the test wins that you're getting now, you should be a bit careful about that, because potentially what works great during the Christmas period is less effective or persuasive during the non-Christmas period. And so here we're talking about tests around like urgencies, deadlines, discounts. Maybe they're just not as compelling in January as they are in December. We sometimes see what we might call short-term thinking in a couple of different respects. One is, and yeah, apologies, the title is over the key part of this dark pattern design, but using tactics like dark pattern designs that, in this case, prioritizing the emphasis on the sign up button as opposed to the no thanks, which is an underlined text link that you can't see behind the slide title. And while you might get some short-term benefits during the peak period from tactics like these, consumers are intelligent these days. They kind of know when they're being manipulated. We've done some research around this, and there are longer-term impacts to your brand, to lifetime value, to repeat purchase from pursuing this type of approach. And similarly, having an excessive focus on discounts can become somewhat a race to the bottom. That's you kind of train consumers to expect that from you, and potentially they'll no longer buy things from you when they're full price. So trying to deploy discounts in an intelligent and targeted manner rather than just a blanket 20% off site-wide coupon to try and drive some sales in the last days of the campaign. So yeah, that was the content for the webinar. And now just a few more housekeeping slides. Mario?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for running us through today's presentation. Just to let everyone know, in today's webinar, once we switch off Zoom, there's going to be a little survey that pops up. It's super, super quick. We appreciate as much feedback as we can get. We're always looking to refine the copy and content and just get as much feedback as we can so we can improve for next time. So before we finish, though, we've got time for a few questions. So let me just check, see what has come through. And we've got a couple of questions. Guys, feel free to put your hands up to take these. The first question, how soon after Christmas should we start thinking about our CRO planning?
I'll let you jump in on that one, Michael.
Yep. So I would say you probably want to do it as soon as possible. I know that's a bit kind of not helpful, so I'll give a bit more specifics. If you're planning up for a particular event or date, 3 months I've found from personal experience is a good kind of runway time to account for all the potential pitfalls and issues you might run into. Because when you really think about the whole process, which is coming up with the plan, getting sign-offs, going through design, then getting sign-offs on design, then building it, then QAing everything. There's so many areas that you can have issues, problems, challenges, and 3 months, I think, is a pretty good amount of time to, allow for dealing with all of those. 1 month is probably the minimum, but yeah, I would aim for 3 months if possible.
I suppose it's always dependent on the complexity of your business. The more complex you are, perhaps more time you will allow for planning and ideation and just getting things ready for the year. For the next question, have you seen any other pitfalls around CRO for affecting peak seasonality periods?
I'll jump into that one. I would say that the probably the biggest one that is not so much directly CRO related, but is something that you'd need to collaborate with other teams around, is just the capacity of your infrastructure technically to deal with the increased demand. And so you want to make sure that you're giving really the most accurate forecasts you can to your IT and developers as far as what traffic levels you're expecting, so that they can do load testing and ensure that your website is going to be able to handle the load when the time comes. And obviously, we've seen many instances of brands, particularly on Black Friday, who have these challenges, and the reason we see them is because they get into the media. And so not only is there an impact financially on the people who aren't able to purchase in the moment, but detrimental impacts to your brand moving forward as well.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I think that brings us to the end of Q&A. Really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy days to join us for today's webinar. We always appreciate it because we know people have lots of options for content, and we appreciate it when people take the time to engage with us. As I mentioned at the start of today's session, Ratio is a digital experience optimization consultancy. We work with loads of clients, helping them get the right data together, connecting systems, putting together CRO strategies, and helping them drive those online conversions. And we'd love to have a conversation afterwards around all the challenges that you're seeing. So if there's anything that is top of mind as challenges for the upcoming season, please let us know. Happy to always talk about it. And we will be sure to let you know for our next webinar once it's live, which will be around checkout and cart abandonment optimization. That should be live pretty soon. So we'll send the link around for hopefully people to join us on the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.